Okay, we're rapid application development, and it's lesson 12:13, part 3. And we're talking about multiple document interfaces here. So let's go to the PowerPoint here. So far, everything you've done has been a single document interface, right? So you're only looking at one form at a time, right? And the one form, basically, it acts independently from every other form, right? Well, a multiple document interface is like when you open up an application like Word. Word's a great example of that, or Excel, right? When you open up Word, you can have more than one document inside the interface, right? So you have, let's say, document 1, document 2, or whatever, and it doesn't create a new instance of the application, right, necessarily. It creates different documents within the application, right? So you can have multiple documents opened up, and then you switch between the documents. So you have a parent form, and you also have child forms, as an example. Okay? So again, each of the child windows, you can do everything with them that you normally can do. You can open them, you can maximize them, you can minimize them, you can restore them, you can even close them. But each window, each child window or child form is independent of every other child form. How does it look? It looks kind of like this, right? So here's your parent window, and then you have your child 1 document and your child 2 document, and each of these child forms are just a number of different forms that are going to come up, right? Here's an example also of a status bar and some status bar labels that you can add into your application, right? So again, how do we do it? So when we create an MDI project, we have to kind of designate a form as a parent. This is one way of doing it. So you take a regular form, you designate it as a parent, and then you're going to kind of set and the way to do that is to say the is MDI container property of the form, you got to set that to true. Once you've done that, the way the form looks automatically changes. It doesn't look like a regular form anymore. Because now it's a container form. It's not a regular form that has regular controls like everything else. It doesn't look like that anymore, right? At runtime, so not at design time, but at runtime, you can designate your child forms. There's 2 ways of doing it, right? Well, there's more than 2 ways, but the 2 ways that I've seen a lot is A, you generate a child form at like runtime completely. So there is no actual child form itself. You completely generate the child form from scratch, right? Like programmatically is what I'm talking about. Okay. Or option 2 is you create your child form as part of the project, and then you instantiate that child form with all of its controls as the child form to the parent. In which case you have a lot more control, and you can do drag and drop kind of UI building with that kind of way of doing that way. Again, one thing you need to do, one of the problems that you have when you use a child form is you have to kind of specify that each of the child forms, as an example, has it's kind of a unique identifier, like a title bar that every child form should show that it's like, document 1, document 2, document 3, whatever it is. If you're opening multiple instances of the child forms. So one way of doing that, just like Microsoft Word, as an example, again, going with that example, is modify the title bar to add in the number of the forms that have opened. Okay? And again, if I was going to create if I was going to open up child number 1, then I would say, here's the way of doing it programmatically. So you're actually accessing this child form. So you create a child form. You actually create your controls on the child form, and now you're just instantiating your child form. And what you're doing also is on the child form itself, you're accessing, once it's been instantiated, you change the MDI parent to point to this form, the originating parent form. So the child automatically knows who its parent is, right? Now, the great thing about child forms and parent forms is a child form can also be a parent form. So it can have children of its own, kind of thing, which is kind of weird, right? And I haven't seen a lot of applications that use that kind of logic, where you have, a master, application. It has a bunch of children, and they have children of their own, right? So you have separate documents. Rare, but it gives you a lot of control in the stuff that you can do if you wanted to create this kind of multiple document application. And here you're actually modifying when you instantiate it, you're modifying the it's another variation of the tool strip. Here's child 1, the standard way of doing it. And now I'm going to change the title, the text of the actual form itself, to show that the child 1 plus I'm going to set up a class level variable called the child 1 counter, like a count integer, and I'm just adding it on to the text of the child form. So I say, well, child form document 1, child form document 2, and so on. Right? One thing that you also want to do when you have child forms is you want to be able to do in your window menu, you want to be able to do kind of like the ability for you to cascade or tile horizontal, vertical, to kind of arrange your child forms at times. You want to be able to try and do that because Word has this great function, so does Excel, where you can kind of put the child forms next to each other, right? So they kind of display. And there's ways of doing this to arrange child forms or switch between them. So here's a great way of doing that in your when you create your MenuStrip control, right? You have to you want to kind of create your MDI window list item to make the window display the list of open child windows. You're going to have to kind of make that accessible. Say that. So what I'm doing is I'm saying on my window I want to kind of list how many of these windows are open. And we'll show an example of that. And here is an example of code that allows you to tile the layout vertically or horizontally or cascade the layout of your windows, right? So some simple code for you guys if you're interested in creating this multiple document interface. Will I use this on the exam? Probably not. Like I said, it's a little bit buggy at times and it takes a little bit of memory, slows things down a little bit, and creates some complications for you that may not be worth it in the 2.5 hours that we have. So chances are it's not going to be there. But I want to show you how to do it because oftentimes you build an application that has multiple documents. Another example of a multiple document type of application would be some kind of paint program. You have your parent document and then you have your child document. And your child document is some kind of bitmap, as an example, right? That you're drawing on, a stage, if you will. So one way we talked about was actually taking a form and designating it as an MDI parent. And the other way of doing it is actually creating an MDI Parent Form, because that's one of the options when you add a new form to your project, right? So, and what this does, it adds in a lot of preset data to your form. So let's take a look at an example, because I've talked a little bit about it, but I want you guys to take a look at it to see what it looks like. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio here, and I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to say New Project. In this particular case, I'm going to say lesson. I'll call it lesson 13, and then we'll say MDI Demo 2, just to make sure it's like something new. Okay, and I've created the wrong thing. Let me go do that again. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to do File New Project, and instead of a Setup Project, I wanted to do a Windows project, Windows Form application. And we'll just try that again. We'll make it something else now because that option is gone. MDI Demo 3. There we go. MDI Demo 3. I wasn't watching what I was doing there. Okay, so you get your form. So this is option 1. Option 1 is you click on the form itself and you go to your list of properties in your properties window and you say, is MDI container? And you change this to true. When I do this, take a look. As soon as I do this, your form looks like this 1 second, and the next second it looks like this. So if you notice, if I take a label and I drop it on this form, it works, but it's kind of weird, right? Because this is a container form, right? So you can have everything that can go on here, like buttons and labels. And if I was to run this thing, as an example, it's going to be there, right, buttons and labels, but it's also a container for subforms, which is kind of weird, right? Because you don't see like an MDI container with buttons and labels in the middle. The container space is just a space for your forms to appear, right? But you could do it this way too if you really wanted to. It's just kind of weird. So let's get rid of it and get rid of the button. And just get rid of the button, get rid of the label. So this is form 1. And then what I do is I designate this thing, right? Here's my designate. I'm going to designate this as like my parent form. Here's like one way of doing it. So here's parent form, right? Yes, I want to change the name, right? And I don't know, the form itself should probably have, the parent form itself, before I create the child forms, it should probably have some kind of like an icon bar or something, a menu bar for sure, right? So here's my menus and toolbars, and I'm going to definitely put in a menu strip. So I'm going to just kind of drag and drop a menu strip on here, because that's necessary. You have to have some kind of menu, that's normal, right? And I'm probably going to put in a tool strip too, because I think a tool strip would be key. So there's my tool strip and my menu strip, but right now they're empty, right? So if I want to add my menu, you know, I can go in here and put a menu item in there, or I could click on this little thing, this little arrow here, and it says Insert Standard Items. And we haven't kind of talked about this yet. Let's take a look, guys. So I go Insert Standard Items and clickety-click. My menus are standard. File, Edit, Tools, and Help, automatically. Okay? One click. You're going to need to know how to do this on the exam, because I'm going to ask you to make menus. And sometimes, look, if you notice, the menus are all ready to rock and roll.
That's awesome.
There's nothing for you to type here. It's all typed in for you, right? Nice and quick. And I want to enter like a set of icons. And guess what? I want to do the same thing. I don't want to type thing. I'm a lazy guy, right? So I go here, Insert Standard Items, clickety-click. All my standard items are there, right? Now, they don't do anything. Example would be if I run this form now, and here it is, my standard parent form, and I click on this stuff. It doesn't do anything. It needs for you to program it all. Even this stuff, new, you know, save, or whatever, right? It has no functionality. You have to code it all. But one thing it does, it allows me to do that very quickly. The other thing that you see in a lot of these MDI windows, and you know what? Visual Studio is another example of an MDI application, because you have your application itself, and then the forms that I have in here, right? Like in Visual Studio, it's just we're showing a tab view for the forms as opposed to you know, the alternate that we see with Word, right? So let's suppose I add in another kind of control. For example, a status bar. I double click on that, and now I have a status bar on the bottom. And if you notice down here, I can't embed standard items for a status bar. That just doesn't exist, right? But I could change the type of status bar, and we're going to talk about that, so it's a label that it produces some other kind of effect later on. We'll see that, right? So definitely tool strips, tool strip containers, menu strips, you know, all these kind of things is stuff that's part of our regular, you know, kind of a parent form. I probably want to change my text for the parent form to parent form or something else, whatever the name of the application is, right? Parent form. And now I want to create a new form. So project, add Windows form. I'm just going to create another form, and I'm going to call this one child form, right? Clickety-click. I added it. Okay. My child form, maybe I'll put a couple of buttons in there or something. So I'll put a button. Right, here's my button, and maybe I'll make it so that this button says, I don't know, save, or something like that, right? And I'll call the button the save button. Right, so here's save button, right? So I've got my parent form, and my parent form is pretty small, and my child form and my parent form kind of look the same. They're the same size, right? Chances are what I want to do is make my parent form a little bigger, right? I probably want to make my parent form just a tad bigger so it can contain my child form a little easier, right? This would be probably more of a standard way of doing it. Now, I haven't done anything yet, but let's say when I click on this button here, right, I'll choose the new tool strip menu, a button click. I want to instantiate my child form. Well, it's the same as instantiating any other form, right? So I know my child form exists, so maybe I say child form, and I say, you know, maybe I'll call it my new child form, or whatever object name you want to give it, is equal to new child form, right? So first I instantiate it. One thing I need to do, and I should do if I create child forms, is I should use the MDI parent property of the child form to point to me, to the calling form, which is the parent, right? So I should say something like my new child form dot MDI parent, right, is equal to this. That's the next level. Right? So I got to kind of say, well, the child form knows about me. I'm its parent, right? When I'm creating it, and then I actually display the form. So child form dot show.
Wouldn't you have to make this sort of an array or something if you want to instantiate multiple child forms?
Sorry, my child. No, you'll see. So if I want to go that show, if I actually type things in today.
Right.
Okay, so here it is. One simple thing. I'm using one. I'm only going to code one tool. I could code all of them, but I won't. And now I run it. And when I click on this little button here, clickety-click, a child form appears, right? And again, I click another one. There's another one. Another one. Here's another one. Another one. Here's another one. What am I doing? I'm instantiating more than one object. Each of these objects have its own save button, and it doesn't know about the other objects, right? They're separate objects. They're separate instantiated objects that I've created based on my child form. I can make as many as I want, right? Okay, all fine and good. Oh, I could, but you should probably limit yourself to some otherwise your memory's going to run out, right? But you should probably limit it to an X number of forms. Word and actually, most modern applications don't limit you. Okay? It's only based on your memory anyway. So they just let you do whatever you want. And then finally they say, you ran out of memory, buddy, right? So that's one way of doing it. But to me, this is to me a brute force way of creating a MDI application. Let's do it the real way. Right, this is the way I'd rather do it because I'm a lazy guy, right? So let's do it the lazy way, which I really fully encourage you to do, all right? Which is much better than this way, all right? So we'll close this project down. Close this project down. We'll open up a new project, right? And this time it'll be an MDI project, and we'll call it, I don't know, lesson 13. In this particular case, MDI Demo 4, because I've made some mistakes in the past, right? So right now I'm opening up a Windows Form application. That's what I'm doing, right? And if you look, there's other options I have here as well, right? That's fine. I can stick with that, and I'll press OK. Now I have this ugly form here, but I'm going to use this form as my child form. So first of all, I'm going to rename this thing, right? I'm going to rename the form and call it child form. Here's where I'm going to make my child form. All my changes on my form are going to be done here for my child form. And you're like, wait a minute, where's the parent, right? I'll show you. Because the parent's where all the work is done, right? Child form is where you program your stuff that's going to appear on the child, right? So maybe I'll drop a button in here, like maybe a save button or a next button. Maybe I want to create a, I don't know, add some containers in here. I'm just going to drop some random things in here. Here, I'll drag in a TabControl, which we're going to talk about in a second. Anyway, here's my TabControl, right? So I have my TabControl in here as an example, right? I have my child form. But now I want to add my parent form, right? So I go Project, Add Windows Form, and I go to me, which is better, goes to Windows Form and choose MDI Parent Form. And I call this whatever I want. In this case, I'll say Parent Form. Now here's the great thing about this thing. When I click Add, what does it do? It adds everything, right? It adds my tool strips. It does everything you could possibly think of. It's got my status bar. It's got my standard icons. And guess what? Never mind that they're standard, but if I press Start, right? Right now I'm going to go to my child form, right? So I got to change my. Sorry, I got to go one more change here before I make it. I was getting excited. Let me just go back. So I go here. Far too excited. I'll go here and I'll put parent form in here in my program.cs file here, right? I'll save it. And then when I run it again, now it'll kick up the parent form. There it is. Oh, my parent form. And I click this button, boom, another window form comes up, and another one. These are just child forms that come up, right? Now it doesn't point to my child form, but it makes these. It does everything all at once in the top of my form, right? So I do no work. There's no work here. This functionality here, if I press the open button, it does my open dialog, right? My open file dialog fires right away, right? Same thing with my save and my print. It does everything else that I want it to do. It's all built in. And in fact, it'll even do things like cascading, tile, horizontal, vertical, close all. It does everything that I want it to do, right?
So it's all pre-programmed.
It's all pre-done for you, is what I'm saying, for your MDI document. To me, this is the epitome of laziness that I like. I like this kind of laziness. But we still got to make a couple changes to this form. One of them is we wanted to use our child form and not these generated child forms that it does on the fly. We don't want that. We want to use our child form. So how do we do that? So we go to the parent form itself. We're going to modify. We're going to see some code in there already, pre-done. So here's our form. If you notice, it says our child form number starts off at 0. I want to start off at 1 because that 0 doesn't make any sense to me, right? So it's my first form. Form 1, Form 2, Form 3. For the user, they don't care about Form 0. What the hell is that, right? So that's the first thing I got to change. The second thing is, if you notice, when I do my show new form, right, item, this is a method that I'm calling, right? I don't want to show a random form, right? I want to do a child form. So I got to change this to child form. This is the easy changes we're going to make here. And this same thing over here, right? I'm not going to make any other changes. Just that. Now I'm going to run it. Okay? And remember, in my child form, if I've done this correctly, as if I have, here it is. If I've done this correctly, once I press this button, my form with my tabs and everything else will come out, right? So now I can pick as many of these as I want, and as many of them is going to come up as I want. They're going to keep going as long as I want them to come out, and I can tile them. I can cascade them. I can tile horizontally. I can tile vertically, and I can switch between them. It's all built in functionality, right? So I can close them all, right? And do whatever I want to do, right? All built-in functionality, 0 coding, 0, right? That I like, right? Now the thing is, there's still work to be done here. Some of these the functions here on top of your toolbar don't work. Like for example, if I click this, doesn't work. This doesn't work. My print doesn't work. My save works, but it doesn't do what I think it does. It doesn't do a save as, right? On my file menu, it does. If you click save as, it'll bring the save file dialog up. Right? That allows you to do, but it doesn't actually do anything. You physically have to, even though the dialogues come up, you still have to program them a little bit, right? So there's still some code to be done on that side because you need to know what kind of file you're doing and stuff. But pretty much, if you look at the code, let's take a look here. Even when you open your file dialog, it already puts your filter in place, right? For text files. It does your folder path, so it kind of just decides where the folder path is going to look at. It does all kinds of stuff for you, and even generate some of the copy and cuts and controls and all these stubs for your for some of the functionality that you should need in your MDI form. So to me, this is the way to do it. I wouldn't do it the other way unless somehow you wanted to do some kind of custom parent form that didn't include standard controls. And it's possible. Maybe you want to make your own controls. To me, though, even if I was going to make custom controls, in any Windows application, I would include all its standard controls and standard windows, standard menus, right? And then from there, I'd modify backwards. Example of this would be the MDI example that for this project, for this particular lesson. Let's close the solution. This time I'll open a project that I've already pre-done for you guys, and it's on Blackboard. So here's my MDI demo 1, 2, 3, 4, but here's my MDI project. This is the one I want to look at. It's called MDI Project for you. And it's the same project that I have my setup. I've kind of put together a setup file, which we'll talk about in a second. Here's my MDI project. And I'm just going to ignore this MDI project setup for a second, right? I have an about form, a child form, and a parent form. And if you look at the parent form, hey, it looks the same as before. I've modified some of the controls because I didn't need all of them, right? One thing I could have done is taken out the contents. I don't need that, so I'm going to just remove this. I don't need my index because I haven't done that right now, or a search. I don't have any functionality for that, but I do have an about bar, about form that should come up, right? So I'll leave that in there for now. There's also a divider I could probably take out as well, right? I don't need that divider. All right, and then for my Windows, that's okay. I like this. This is just Windows functionality, right? This is okay. I can click on and off my toolbars, my toolbar and my status bar. I can turn them off or on. This is good. And again, you can do this for a number of toolbars. Right now I have my standard toolbar, but you can add your own custom toolbar with your own custom icons, right? They don't have to be the standard icons. You can make your own icons for your application, right? So here's my toolbars. Here's my file. I like save and save as and print preview. Print setup, I don't have anything for that right now, so I'm just going to delete that, right? So again, you can modify your MDI form as you see fit. And I'm going to save everything here. When I run it, similar to what you saw before, once I start off my form, here's my form, and I've created a business contact with these tabs, right? Where I can get a person to kind of add in their business contact information. There's no validation here. This is just a kind of placeholders right now. And if I click Save, right, it actually launches the Save dialog, right? And if you notice on the bottom here, I have the current running time, right, which I'll show you how to do in a second. So how did I do all this stuff? Again, I use my standard parent form that I included in here. My about form is a standard about form. And here's my child form. And we'll view the code in the child form. It's very basic, right? What I'm doing is, in order for me to launch an event handler that exists on the parent, I have to pass in this event handler. I have to create an event handler object. And what I'm saying is I actually name it my parent save click, right? So if I want to use the save button, my save button on the form is going to open up the save file dialog on the parent somehow. I've got to associate them or create a reference between the child form and the parent's method, whatever I'm using. And this is how you do it. You pass in a method into the child forms. So let's kill that. Here's the parent form. Let's take a look at the code here. Again, some of the same stuff we saw before. Again, one thing I didn't do and I forgot to do this was change the number to 1 because I don't think 0 makes any sense. So I'll save that. And let me just go down here for a second. So here's my exit, my tool, all the stuff that I normally have in here. But I also included a timer, right? And what I'm doing here with the timer is I'm saying I take the date time, right, and I add this to the time tool strip status label.txt, right? So I change the status label, right? So here's the form, and if you notice on the bottom here, I have 2 status labels: a time status label and a date status label. You can have as many status labels as you want. I'd include the time. I'm going to change it. I'm going to update it when my as my timer updates every 1,000 milliseconds or every second. I activate my timer and it actually adds a second to my time. It actually pulls my time again and again, over and over again. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Technically speaking, should you not have it be refreshing the date? Because right now, if it goes to midnight, it switches over your date.
Technically, yes. Otherwise, it will be wrong. Right? But I didn't do that in this particular case. But yes, you could do that as well. Right? So basically every second, it'll pull. You should be able to pull. You should pull both.
Yeah.
Right at the end of the day. Right? Because if you look at this as an example, and if I look at, like, when I load the form, right? So on form load, right, what I want to do, let me see what my form load is. Actually, I should just double click on it. So here it is. So on form load, one thing I'm doing is I'm changing my date and my time to this short date string and long date string, which we're going to cover in a bit, right? And all I'm doing is I'm updating it with the timer every second. So what I should do, yes, theoretically, Jean-Luc, you're correct. Actually, that's not theoretically, you're correct. I should just say that. So I should take this information right here. So we need to do this, copy it. And when we go back to the timer, right, I should just put it in here again. Right? So at the end of the day, you want to do both. If it switches over, like you said, it's a good practice to do. So again, when I run it, no changes made here, right? But it does show the time. It's at 12 o'clock already. Darn.
It is.
And the date. I can't believe it. And the date.
Spent full 3 hours.
It's not yet. It's not yet. Almost there. For the parent form. So again, I think this is the way to do it. Myself, I would. This is an example of I've taken the parent form and I've modified the project for my own use. And again, for my, we're going to leave this thing open for a second because we're going to refer back to this application for our setup and for our tab controls, which we're going to see in a second. Okay. So that covers parent stuff, parent-child relationships. I've kind of covered all this. So toolbars and status bars, again, I've kind of covered that for you too. To me, you should have some standard items inserted. Whether you do it through the toolbar and you choose the smart tag and insert standard items, I think all your applications, unless you make something really, really, truly custom, you should have some standard toolbars that every user will understand how to use. Just like they know how to use, if they know how to use a Windows application, there should be zero learning curve to understanding how to save and load their documents using your application. So try and use some standard forms, form window menus and icon bars. We kind of covered this already. Now you could do your own custom work as well, Like when you're in here, you could create your own buttons, and you can also create your own your button images, as an example, right? You can choose whatever, like for example, the image right now is a system.drawing.bitmap object that's just a standard button, right? But you can create whatever image you want in your toolbars. And again, I would recommend doing this. I would recommend inserting your standard items when you choose the smart tag. And we've talked to the label, but this is kind of like some status bars that or status labels you should add. So I've kind of put this together already for you on your example online. So your date tool status bar and your time tool strip status label, those two things there, I've kind of included those. And you can also include other information, like for example, which form is currently active, as an example, or maybe other kind of information that you want to give the user. And you can put anything you want on your status bar that makes any sense. So useful feedback for any application. We've kind of covered this already, so I'm going to skip through. Here's a status bar code example. I've kind of shown that already, and this just updates the time. But again, as Jean-Luc said, here immortalized again on this video, right? Update the date as well. Makes sense. Tab controls. So to me, you're going to need to know how to use tab controls for your exam. All right? So please take a look at how this works. You're going to have to understand how they're just containers. That's all they are, right? So that each container of the tab control can hold its own controls, and basically is another way of hiding and showing different form data. One thing to note. It's all in the same form. The tab controls are not their own classes. And therefore, you cannot give the same name to labels and controls on the actual tab control on each tab page as any other page. Each control has to be unique. If you do that, it'll mess things up. Don't do it. It's only one class. Okay? So you're not using multiple classes. You're not embedding a form within another form. You're not doing that. That's not. There's no child-parent relationship here, right? These are just tabs, and the tabs are simply containers. Okay, so let's take it. So again, it looks like, I think it does combine well with an MDI project where, for example, each form can house what appears to be multiple pages. So example would be this. You generate your character on tab 1. I don't know. I'm shrugging my shoulders here. Maybe this is too much for you to understand, but And then maybe on tab 2, you have your race. And maybe on tab 3, you have other information. So you have to know how to position things on different tabs, make them appear properly for yourself. And then, again, each of the instead of using multiple forms, in this particular case, you're only using one form with multiple tabs. So different kind of structure altogether. How does it look? You go to your tab control, you drag and drop your tab control to fill the form. And then what you can do is, in there, just like we normally do, you can add tab pages into your collection of pages. And each tab page itself has its own text property and can carry its own, it'll show and hide automatically any of the controls that it contains. Right? It's almost like any other kind of container, right? Like a group box, right? So here's the example that I kind of gave with my parent-child form, and I just made it so that you have a contact form, that's one of your tabs, a products, and maybe a services. Again, you can think of different ways of doing this. Let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. Let's go back to our application, right? So here's my child form, and I've got these tabs in here, right? If you notice, these other tabs here that I have, products and services and so on, right, as an example, they just have like one big text box. That's a big text area, right? But they can have whatever controls you want, right? They can even have other button controls. Now, how do you show and hide different tab controls programmatically? Does anyone have an idea? Well, each of them is a tab page, right? So if you think about this, and I'm not going to tell you how to do this for good reason. This tab page itself, right? If I look through the controls, if I just look at this tab page, not the products page, but the contact info tab page, and if I scroll down, look what it says. It's tab control 1. That's what's highlighted, not the tab page itself. To highlight the tab page, you got to click inside the tab page itself. So this now I'm inside the tab page, right? My tab page text is contact info, right? And if I look at the top, this is the name of my tab page, contact tab page. So theoretically, I should be able to show any page I want, right? What if we just did that? What if we added a button as an example?
Can you hide the top controls there and then use that?
These ones here?
To kind of.
Or these ones here?
Have a next button that actually, instead of opening a whole new form, just actually tabs through invisible tabs?
You could. Oh, I mean, like not even have this.
Well, you have like the
tab
form.
showing.
I don't want the tab showing, so
The
it'd
tab
be like
itself.
invisible control. Because then you could have one form that has everything you need in it.
You'd have to make your own custom control. That's the
Awesome.
answer.
Okay.
That's the answer. There's nothing built in that'll do that.
Okay.
You have to make your own custom control, and it's doable. What you're asking is doable. You probably want to do it with a WPF type of application. That's better. I'm just being honest with you. I wouldn't do it here without using a WPF. I think it's the way to go. A simple Windows form won't give you the same kind of control, right? So, and there's a lot of things you can do with the WPF form. We're not going to cover it, unfortunately, in this course because we don't have time. Like right now, it's a whole other topic. Like it would take another 1, maybe 2, 3 sessions more to do it right, to do it justice. We don't have time. So, but that's how I would do it. But here, if I want to tab through, like I was saying, and I want to create a button. So I've got my outside button, my save button, and I got my inside button. That's part of my control. And I want to kind of create this next button. Let's just do an example. So here's my next button, and I change my text for the next button to next. Remember, all these controls are on the same form, right? So if I click on this contact name as an example, or my next button, double click on it, it doesn't show tab 1 next button. It just shows next button, which means you can't have the same name for any of your controls in all the other tabs. It's just not doable, right? Once you'll be renamed automatically. It'll cause a syntax error if you try and to use the same names for all of your controls. It'll just rename it automatically for you if you drag and drop. So here's my next button, and I want to go to the next tab form, right? So, I mean, I know that it's called contact. I'm on my contact form, but I want to go to my products form or something. My products. So I start typing product, and I look and I see it comes up with product tab page, right? So I bring up product tab page because I think my products are first and then my services. So I click on that first, or I select that with my code hinting, right? And then I kind of scroll down and I look at all my other functions. Well, I can do different things here, right? I can change my background color. I can do all kinds of stuff down here. I could probably do even a show and hide, my thinking. And there it is. There's my show, right? So let's try it out. So I want to show my tab page, right? Let's see if it works. So I run the application now. It's an MDI application, so I got to start with a child document. And now all my child documents have a next button. Here's my next button. Here's another one. Here's another next button. You see all of them have next buttons and save buttons because I'm instantiating these as individual objects. If I click the next button, it doesn't do anything, right? Because it's saying I want to show my products tab. Well, that's not what's happening. I'm not able to switch to this products tab. That's what I really want to do. So the challenge for you, right? And I would look at this because you may need to do this for your exam, right? I'm not going to show you how to do this, but I may ask you to do it, right? So instead of Googling it on the day of the exam, here's some homework for you for next week. You don't have an assignment for next week, but here's some exam prep for you guys, right? Take a look how to do buttons like this. If I go with a next button here, and I want to go to my next tab instead of clicking on the tab itself, how do I do it, right? And can I disable or enable these tabs up here, right, as an example? Like, for example, my products tab. Let's go back to my child form. Right, here's my products tab. Is there a way, right now I'm looking at the whole document, but if I want to just look at my products tab itself, here it is, right? Is there a way of of locking or enabling, disabling, and it is. Look, here's my enable, disable. I can enable, disable tabs. If I put enable is equal to false for my products tab, right, and I run my application again, here I go, and I start it, right, well, guess what? The whole thing is disabled, not just my products tab, so that doesn't work, right? I can't do anything in here at all, right? I can't touch my whole window, so that's not right, right? So again, if it says enabled, right? If you notice this is enabled is equal to true, if I click down here, I've disabled my whole form, right? Now I'm going to resize this window here, so I'm inside my container. So here I'm inside my container now, my products tab, and now I'm just going to, if I see if I can disable this thing, well, there is no enabled property here, right? The control itself does not have an enabled, right? It has other kinds of controls, other things that you can do with it, right? And this is not something that you guys should explore, right? What can you do with your tabs? Why use a tab if all you can do is show and hide data, right? Show and hide different information. What other things can you do with it? There's a for color. You can change the color of the background. Well, let's change that. If we want to change the color to make the tab colors all different, sure, let's make it blue. You know, or actually choose a color. Oops. Here, I'll choose a color like a web safe color like blue, some kind of blue color. There we go. Right? So that's my for color, right? And then maybe, again, what is my for color effect? Right, text, right? Then I can change my background color. Here's my background color. If I want to create my, where's my background image? Here's my background color. And now, right now it's transparent, but I can choose a gray if I want, or something else. And if I run it, and if I go back to my contact page, I can customize those things, right? So here we go. I'll start. I'll access it, but my next button doesn't work. And I go to this form. It's definitely different, and I can type in here if I want. Take care, guys. But that's all I can really do here. Right, I can't access it. So again, I challenge you guys to take a look at how do you move things between here and here. All right, there's ways of doing it. Yeah.
I was gonna add something. Probably not very good.
It's okay.
There was a YouTube video that showed you how to do what he was asking, to hide the tabs on TabControl.
Yeah. Good. Show me.
It's kind of a brutish way though. They
Brute force.
put something on top to hide.
Oh, there you go. So so that's another way of doing
And
it.
then
So
they put the next and back buttons in it. It looked nice, but I mean, if you look at the code, it's kind of.
that's neat. That's neat. But you know, and you want to use buttons instead of tabs. Yes, that's the way of doing it. It would be another way of doing it for sure, because all you're doing is overlaying whatever's on top is going to be. So you basically just put a rectangle on top, right? That's what they're doing, and they're tabbing between it, and you don't see the tabs. That's fine, right? And the way that would be accomplished is if I was to go down to my drawing tools,
Censored.
right? So I look at some components, right? And under, I believe, Visual Basic Power Packs, they have a rectangle shape. Here it is, right? And I'm going to just draw a rectangle shape on top of the actual form itself, right? So wherever it allows me to. And if you notice, it doesn't allow me to do it here.
You'd have to do it on the
Right. Even on the child, I mean, I could probably do it here, look, right? But I mean, right now it's just a rectangle, and then the rectangle shape itself, my background color, right, is a control color. I'd have to change it. I don't know, some other kind of active color or something. And my background style is transparent. I have to make it opaque, right? So here it is. But if you notice, and this is where this actual thing is there, it's not going to show up, right? So even if I try and move this thing, right, it's behind the forms right here.
So you'd have to change. I don't know what it would be called this, but the Z index or something.
And I mean, you could layer things like that's a great thing about these things, that you could layer them so that if I put it here as an example, right, one is layered on top of the other one, right? So you know, I could arrange it different ways, definitely, right? If I can scroll down here, and again, you could probably arrange it so that it's backwards or forwards or appears hidden or whatever. Like I can't, if I click on the actual control itself, like here, right? I can only add and remove tabs. That's all I can do, right? The collections itself, the TabPages collection, shows me all the information for my properties for each of the tabs, right? So this does what this does, right? But it doesn't actually show me for the tab collection itself any kind of control. So there's ways of doing it for sure. Like you said, it's probably a brute force way of doing it, right?
What?
To hide the tab, to hide these completely. Yeah. Again, I'm telling you, you'd probably have to create, the best way to do is create a custom control you base off of the tab control, and you need to know the class, how it works, and so on. Okay. Let us and of course delete. No, it's just my keyboard because I'm using a Mac and I'm doing a virtual machine. It doesn't work like regular Windows keyboards, so sometimes you get some weird effects. Okay, back to this. We're almost done. We have a couple things you have to take a look at as well, and then I'll let you guys go with some information. XML data files. I'm not going to cover examples. There's an example online for you. But it's a really good practice to understand how to use XML data because you want sometimes to load up XML data from from a file, and it's a very common way of doing it. The other thing you want to look at is instead of XML, JSON, right? Those are the two standard formats that we use to house data, other than using a database, right? Sometimes what you even want to do is you want to temporarily house your database data in an XML file, right? Especially if you want to export your data from a database. A good way of doing it is to put it into an XML file or some kind of CSV, comma separated file that you can port over to Excel or Access or something else. But the way we do it is we want to be able to, there's a couple things we do. One thing to know about XML data is that it looks very similar to the HTML tags that we see in websites, right? So all of your XML data is surrounded, your form itself, on your text, your document has kind of like a root tag. Let's say what this thing is, whatever the thing is. For example, it's a book sale document. It has maybe book sale will be your tag, and then / book sale will be your ending tag, just like you would if you made custom HTML tags. It looks like that a lot. So you have your root node, right? And then you have child nodes based of all the root nodes, right? So if you haven't done XML, I mean, it's kind of a high-level explanation of what it is. If your child nodes, right, they can also have child nodes of their own. And then each node itself, as you go down the level, it could have siblings. So child nodes of the same level would be your siblings. So how does it look? Well, it kind of looks like this, right? So here's an example of an XML file, right? You have bookstore is your file, is your root node. And then you have a child node called book, right? The book itself is the child node. Now, inside the child node, you have several different books, right? These are different elements or different items, right? It's the same node, right? Inside the book node, you have several child nodes. So here's title, author, and price. Each of these nodes are sibling nodes, right? Because they're inside the book node, right? So again, there's different levels in this tree hierarchy, right? But each of these things, each of these book elements describes another a field, if you will, or another entry into your data, right? So you have a book, and the book is going to have some properties. It's going to have a genre, a title, an author, a price, a publication date, an ISBN number, all this kind of stuff. And then there's different ways to include these properties. You can do it inline. So here's your book element, or your book node. And you can put them in here like this. Genre equals to autobiography. Publication date equals 1981, and so on. Or you can make individual nodes like this. Title, author, and so on. And you can have even child nodes of the child nodes. Like, for example, the author has a first name and a last name, right? So all it does, XML describes the data that's being housed in it. That's all it does. So it just uses tags, descriptive tags, to kind of like describe the data that's being stored in the file, right? So you can take the XML, especially if it's standard XML data, and import it into things like databases and other files because they're standard modes of transporting this information back and forth. Same thing with JSON, just a different way of doing it. And here's some XML terminology, right? So you have your start tag and your end tag, your elements, again, contents within a set of tags, your node, which is a branch in the tree, right? Sibling, nodes on the same levels, attribute, anything that's named within, embedded within an element, like this, like a genre or something like that would be an attribute. And then text, anything, any value that's inside the tags, right? And a comment, if sometimes we want to use this for remarks only, but we want to kind of put this inside your XML document to describe the data as well. So there's different ways of reading and writing XML files. I'm not going to go, again, I'm not going to do a real world example here just from a time perspective, but you have a couple of methods, if you will, or classes that we're going to use. There's first of all, whenever you do any kind of XML work, you have to include this in the using part of your document. System.xml has to be included in there, right, in order for you to use the XML writer and XML reader functionality. So those are the two classes. XML load, right, will load in the type of file. This is the identifier. This is one way of doing it. And you can also use the xdocument .load to load the file. So there's two different ways, two different forms of loading in your document. Okay. Once you've loaded the document, and again, you can use different kinds of patterns for your how you get the source for your document itself. And again, there's different ways. This one here just uses a string. This uses a raw string where you can actually put absolute path information. And there's also using this relative path information by using the system.io.directory.getCurrentDirectory plus whatever the name of the document is that you're loading in. So you're loading in it this way, and then from there, once you've loaded it in, you use in your form load, you read it in, and once you use the XML text reader to read in your information into the node. Okay. You use your XML writer to create an XML file when you save stuff, right? So again, I've given you the examples online. I'm giving it to you because if you leave the course without knowing how to do some kind of external file writing, like especially to an XML, we've done kind of data handling before. And by the way, data handling, a file open and close, open file dialog, close file, save file dialog. It's going to be on your exam. You've already done it for assignment number 4. You should know how to do it for your exam. So bring in some snippets. Open file dialog, save file dialog. You're going to need to do that, right? So we're not going to do XML files. I'm not going to make you do it, but I've kind of put together an XML example on Blackboard if you want to view it for yourself. And so that way, at least you can take it away from the course and say, okay, worst case, I have a reference I can go to if I'm going to load and save XML data. Okay, one last topic, and then we're done, and we'll do a little bit of talking about next week, and then it'll be over. So again, we want to create a setup program, and there's different ways of using a setup program that are built into Visual Studio. Like, for example, the click once functionality that exists. You could do that way. But I think it's really a cool practice to learn how to use these more of a commercial product. So Flexera, hopefully you guys have done this. You've downloaded your Flexera InstallShield, right? Limited edition. And if you have, you can follow along with me. You can see how this thing works. So again, you would download it. I kind of give you the link on how to get it. And once you've downloaded it and install it, you want to open your Visual Studio file and select Add New Project. And you can do that within an existing project. So let's kind of do that for one of the projects that I've kind of put together already. So here we're going to go to this. Now I will close this off, and I want to go to one of my projects. I'm going to close my solution. No, I'm not going to save anything here, and I'm going to go to one of my demos that I put together. Right, I just did today. So let's go to MDI Demo 4, and here's where I'm going to actually add in a project. So in my MDI Demo 4, I have my parent form, my child form, and now I feel like, well, this is somehow complete, and I want to package it, and I want to sell my application, and I want to create and install some setup files for other users to use. Well, here I've got my main project, but I want to add another project to my Solution Explorer, and I can do that. I can go to project, right? I can put add new item, right? And I can do different ways. I can add I think I can do it here too, sorry. I think it's add new project. Here it is. Add new project, right? And in here, I want to go to other project types. Okay, and I want to go to setup and deployment. And I have this in setup and deployment. If you've downloaded your InstallShield, it looks like the icon of the standard InstallShield project, right? And I can call this whatever I want, right? So maybe I want to call it something related to my document. So it's called, my document's called MDI demo. Maybe I want to call it MDI setup, right? And then I click OK. It takes me to this interview for my project, right? It says, okay, here's my project assistant where I'm going to define what my application is going to do. And if you notice, inside my Solutions Explorer window, I have a bunch of steps. And actually, they list them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's really stupidly easy to do, right? But I want to show you it because if you've never seen it before, and if your boss says, hey, have you ever used InstallShield? And you say no, right? Now you're going to say, yes, I have, right? Because you've seen InstallShield before. Now this is the basic version. It's not the full premium version. And chances are, if you're working within in a real programming house somewhere, coding house, I'll call it like that, right? It's going to have the premium version with all the functionality, right? This one gives you some basic functions though. So if I click on application information, you can actually just define things like, you know, the company name. I specify my application name. In this particular call, my application is not going to be called MDI setup. Maybe my application is being called my multiple documents, you know, or something else, multi-doc. Whatever you want to call it, right? Your application version you can specify here. It's going to take it right off of your application project information, right? And also your company web address. So let's say, for example, I don't know, my company address is going to be called, I don't know, example.com. I can put it in here, right? Now I can click two things. I can click on my arrows, take me to the next part of the interview, right? Or I can click the next part, which is installation requirements. I have both choices. So if I go back, it takes me back, right? I can go here, it takes me forward. And if you notice, this is interesting. It says, does your application require any specific operating system? Right now I put no. It'll run on every operating system. But that's not really true, is it? Right? I really want to say it can only run probably on Windows 8 or Windows 7. Probably won't run on Windows XP. And I don't care to run on Windows Vista or server of any kind. Or Windows 2000. So maybe Windows 7 and Windows 8 is okay. Right? The other thing is this. Does my application require any special software to be installed? Well, you know what? I know I'm using, within my application, I know I'm using the .NET framework, and it's probably a good idea to include it as a requirement. So I'm probably going to include the latest version of my .NET framework 4.5. Probably a good idea to include .NET framework 4 as well, right? Just to say, kind of need both, one or the other, 4 or greater, right? Because otherwise it won't load, right? I believe, actually, I've targeted my applications for 4.5. So if I do this, it'll probably cause an error with something like Windows 7. So let's leave it like this, right? And I'm packaging it together with my application, right? I don't need Internet Explorer, and I can probably, if I want to, you can, in the real application, the real packager, you can probably add in your own custom software condition that you want to put in here. Like it needs Adobe Acrobat Reader, or it needs something else that doesn't exist here, right? And then I click Next. This one's locked. It says installation architecture, and here I could unlock it as an example if I had the premium version, but I just don't. So I'm going to go Next. This is an important part, this part here, which says I'm at the application file section, right? And if you notice the little lock icon on the features that are locked because of my product type. I'm not using my premium product. I'm using limited edition. It doesn't give you access to everything, right? Under application files, right? It says right now there's really nothing. It tells you the path that it's going to download in your directory. So my first directory is going to be called Georgian College because that's my company name, and usually it'll go under the company name under Microsoft for the type of who's producing the actual application. So Georgian College is my company. Let's just say. So that's going to be the folder that's going to be created on your target system, Georgian College. Next thing is I want to add some outputs, right? So I can add I can add files, and one of the things I need to know is where the hell is my file that I need to add, my executable, right? So if I don't know where that is, right, as an example, you know, I won't be able to add it. Now I know where my files are, right? My files are under the bin debug part of my folder. So I go into there. So my lesson, bin, debug, and here is my lesson 13 MDI demo4.exe. This is the executable file that I want to include in my project. All right, so here's, I click on that and press open. So now this executable is going to be added into my project when it's installed. I also want to add some other project outputs. And if I click on add project outputs, you can also include things like source files, right? So if you want to share your source files for somebody to fool around with, you can include them. You can package only the source files that they need, the .cs files and all the other files you need, and you can send them off to there as well. And other documentation files you can include if you want. But I like to include my content, that's for sure. If there's any kind of content, or sorry, primary output would be the right one. Press OK. So now it's going to add in, into this, there's going to be some primary output that's included in my Georgian file. So these are the two types of things that I'm adding. My executable and some primary output. And then I'm going to click Next. Here it says, do you want to include shortcuts in your start menu, right? Typically, you know, you want to give the options, right? And you can say yes or no to all this. Maybe one for the desktop as well, right? And then the user can choose to kind of not include it or whatever he wants. I could also use an alternate shortcut icon, which you can define. Well, I'm not going to do that here, right? But if you wanted to, you can click on this and then define your custom area for your icon and that you can include later on. Next. Do you want to configure the registry data that your application will install? And I can say yes or no. Here, I'm going to leave it no, because I don't want to mess with my registry. That would be bad, right? Next. But yes, you could do it, and you could mess up your registry bad. I've done it before, one time, just for giggles, right? But it messed it up pretty good, actually. Do you want to prompt the user to enter their company name and username? I would say yes, that was a good option. Do you want to display a license agreement dialog? I could. There's a standard EULA that you can actually fill up, right? So it's inside your is product folder, is product folder, and you can browse to any other standard end user license agreement that you want to include, right? And chances are, if you're working in a coding house, they're going to have their own. Their lawyers are going to type up for you, right? So I'm going to say no for now because I don't have one, right? So they don't have to look at a standard licensing agreement. Do you want your users to be able to modify the installation location of your application? Well, in my case, I would say yes, right? I want them to modify the location. Do you want your users to option to launch your application when the installation completes? Sure, I'll give them that option as well, right? And then there's another option that's grayed out that says, do you want users to be able to selectively install only certain parts of your application? Well, in a premium version, you could do that. And they would give you other options for which parts of your application that you can allow them to install. Next. Okay, so we got your installation preview. There's nothing else done. I could, at this point, I could exit out of here, and I've made my choices, right? It's going to save everything, and of course, Visual Studio has crashed because that's the kind of thing that it is, right? This little beastoid that I have, which is Visual Studio, says, hey, do you want to recover selected files? And I say, sure, recover them. And that's why I did it here in this, nice, safe environment as opposed to, other places. Okay. So I want to open up. Here's my project right here. I can use my start page. I can kill this. And I'm here. I'm back into my project, right? And now I need to build this thing up, right? If I've done this properly, and if I want to go to my my setup assistant here, I just go to Project Assistant, double click, and it brings us this setup assistant up again, right? And I can just check to see if everything's there, and it is. What I want to do at this point is build. Oh, it actually didn't accept my stuff. I lost everything. This is great. Modify. I'll go back here. Let's do this really quickly. I'll change some basics here. I'll say yes. Unclick all these things. That sucks. Guys online, I apologize in advance. Right? I said my architecture I can't check. I have to add my files. So if I don't add these basic files, I'm in trouble. And definitely my outputs, again, I'm going to add my primary output here. Application shortcuts, sure, I'll do that. And I'm not messing with my registry, and I'm definitely allowing all this other stuff. So now I want to build my project. So I click on my actual, just for the setup part itself. So there's two projects here in my Solutions Explorer. There's the actual project files for my code, right, and my design. And there's another project here for my setup. So I right-click onto it and I put Build. Now, sometimes it'll crash. But it'll also give me some warnings if there's something that's not working properly. Now it says Build succeeded, which means I do have a setup now that I can go to. But where are these bloody setup files anyway, right? Well, let's take a look at my my code, right? So unfortunately, I'm running a virtual machine, so I've got to go to Windows Explorer here, or File Explorer. And when I pull it up and I go to Projects, right? Underneath this Demo 4 that I've got going on, this is the one we're looking at, I also have this other set of folders called MDI Setup. And under here, I have another folder called MDI Setup Express. And under DVD-5, I have my disk images, disk, and here they are here, my setup exe file. So they do exist, and actually there's another shortcut that I'm going to show you in a second to get to this directory right away. But here, if I double click on my setup.exe, let's just try it for giggles, right? Like I said, double click, it brings up your standard InstallShield. Hey, here it is, guys, right? This is what I wanted in the first place. And it's going to say, hey, here's welcome to InstallShield for my wizard. And then it asks me for my Windows user and my organization name. If I want to put it in, I can do that. Next. And then it asked me if I want to change my installation place. I could, because I gave it that option. All the changes that I wanted to. Next. It tells me where it's going to go, and I can click on Install and install my app. And it will install, by the way. Now, I don't want to do this because, again, it'll actually install it in the registry, right? And then I have to uninstall it if I want to take it out just like any other app, right? But this is the way that you would do it if you were going to package up an app and put it together. And I guarantee you, there's many times you're going to use something like an InstallShield or other professional level premium product. Yes?
If you did it that way, you'd have to write an uninstaller, wouldn't you?
No.
No. Does it create an uninstaller?
Not this package, not this limited edition, but you could create it in the premium edition. It'll give you the options to create one.
Oh,
But
so
here,
you mean like you'd have to manually create one then, I guess? Or?
yeah, well, you do it through here, the same kind of idea. But here I would create, let's say if I click install, let's just try it for giggles. So here we are. So I'm installing my app now, right? This little like silly application that I made, right? So it's going through. It's going to ask me for permission, just like any other app, right? And I say yes, let's do it. It installs my stuff, finish, right? And if I look at now this is my virtual machine, right? Which is okay, right? So if I go to one day, if I go to my C drive, and if I look at my program files.x86 and I look at Georgian College, right, I can see my my MDI project, right? And here I have a couple of dynamic link libraries that I need, right? It also includes my configuration file and my executable, right? If I go back, my product name, it has the same kind of information. And it also has the C# library, because I needed to include the C# library. It's going to ask me, it's going to check to see if my the latest version of .NET is installed. Yes?
The limited edition does not uninstall. You just have to go through application programs.
That's right, but that's done on an installer.
Okay, so like it's
Yeah, like-
uninstalled on exe.
Right, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to uninstall my little app because I hate it, right? I think it's the ugliest app ever. It's crap, right? Let's hopefully it doesn't crash again. So I've got to go through my regular window. So I'm going to switch out of my virtual machine here. I'm in my view. I'm in Unity mode, right? And I'm going to switch to full screen mode for a second in order for me to do this. So I'm going to go back to Windows 8. Here I am in Windows 8. And this time I don't really need my app anymore. So I'm just going to exit out of this in Visual Studio. And I got to go back to my my control panel, right, like I normally would, and I've got to uninstall it like normal. So I got to go to Programs and Features, right, and in here I'm going to see a listing for Georgian College, and I do. I have both, right, that are in here, and I believe they're installed at different dates. One of them that I installed before, right, the third, and here's one that I installed today. So I've got both applications, right. So let's uninstall both of them because I hate them both, right. So I uninstall this one, and then erase it. It kind of gets rid of the files, right?
Okay, so
Built
it has
in.
a built-in.
But not really a true uninstaller. as per se, like a clickable uninstaller, like you're asking for. This is just one that you build in here. Like it's kind of built into this, right? So it just
just
uninstalls. Yeah. And it removes it from the registry. If there's any registry values that were added, it changes those as well. Cleans it up.
So the base functionality is there. Then if you wanted to like say like, do you want to save your preferences or whatever, then you
Right.
get a manual uninstaller that.
And the manual uninstall will give you all those options, but this doesn't do that. All right, so we're back to normal. So we've kind of covered, in this lesson, we've kind of covered how to kind of package up your document. It's all up here in on your lesson files, right? And everything that you need to create the information, your package, your final package. So it'll even tell how you generate your setup.exe, where to find it. So now, unfortunately for the people online who are watching the video is over, and now we're going to talk about stuff you need for your exam for next week. Actually, you know what I'll do is just because I should probably do it online because some people aren't here, and you never know when people are going to ask for this information. So again, to me, I think if you review some of the lessons that we've covered, and I'm just going to go through here. And I'm just going to talk, so you're going to hear me talking on the video. There's not going to be really anything to look at. You're going to need to know things from assignment 4. Okay, so definitely stuff on assignment 4, the big things. You're going to deal with the database, chances are. All right, it's probably going to be a database of some sort. All right, so you need to understand how to do that. I'm going to provide the database to you, so you're not going to have to, and it's probably going to be an access format if I'm going to provide a database at all. Right? You need to know how to open and save files. You need to load and save files. File management, loading and saving files, reading stuff into text boxes and all that stuff. The same things you did on assignment number 4, you're going to need to do again in this exam. And probably part of the functionality is going to be there already that you're going to have to fix. Okay, chances are. You need to know tab controls, like I said. So if you're watching this and it's number 3 that we're doing, you need to know how to look at them. Look at tab controls. You need to know how to use drag and drop because these are 2 pieces of functionality you haven't seen before, right? Those kind of things you need to know, right? And otherwise, there might be other little things. Like, for example, you should know how to use events really, really well because I may need you to make your own custom buttons, all right? So, for example, explore how do you do a mouse over event, those kind of things. A mouse enter, a mouse leave event, and how that would affect, if you would create your own custom buttons, how would you do such a thing, right? I would explore that as an option because that's one thing I'm going to probably ask you to do. Make your own custom button. Here's an image, right? You're not going to have a lot of time for this. So the great thing about doing this, I'm telling you what you need for your exam. The best thing for you to do is prepare in advance. Bring your drag and drop snippets, your code snippets in, right? So you don't have to do it last minute, right? You don't have to do it on your exam. On your exam, it's going to be an open book exam. You're going to have access to Google. You're going to have access to all the files online in Blackboard. The trouble is, searching through Blackboard and through all my example archives, which, by the way, they all exist, takes some time. So it's going to eat your time to start searching through everything if you need to. And that's the trouble with open book exams because you have access to everything, but you just don't know. You have to know exactly where to find the stuff, right? And I haven't indexed anything for you. It's not like you can go through and there's one big file that you can go search, and then here's all my stuff. So if that's the case, be smart about it. And if you can combine your PDF documents that I've kind of put together online for you into one big PDF, then you could do a search. So instead of going through 13 lesson files or 12 lesson files, combine them if you can into one big PDF and then search through all of them, right? And that way you can quickly find the stuff that you need. I would recommend that as a strategy, right? Again, you only have 2.5 hours. There's probably going to be something that you're going to have to fix. There's probably going to be code that's given to you that you're going to have to use, right? And there's probably going to be code that you're going to have to write, right? These are all parts of the exam that you're going to face next week within a 2.5 hour limit. And hopefully, you're all going to finish and do 100%. So good luck to you.